The Kethrin science vessel Lumina floated in the darkness of space like a white crystal suspended in endless black. Inside the ship, Dr. Teo stood in front of a large screen showing images of a beautiful blue planet below. She was a tall being with thin, elegant limbs and a body that looked like it was made of pale glass. Her eyes were large and gentle, the eyes of someone who had never hunted, never killed, never tasted blood. The Kethrin race had evolved on a peaceful world where food grew from the ground and violence was almost unknown to their kind. For 300 years, the Kethrins had traveled through the stars, studying planets and collecting knowledge. They were scientists first, explorers second, and they believed that understanding the universe was the greatest gift. When they found intelligent life on a planet, they studied it from a distance, always careful not to interfere. But this planet was different. This planet was making Dr. Teo's sensors go crazy. "Look at this," she said to her assistant, Kier, who was standing beside her with a small device in his delicate hands. "The neural patterns are too complex for an animal. See these waves? These are the patterns of a conscious mind. A thinking mind. An intelligent mind." Kerr leaned closer to the screen, his crystalline face catching the light. "But the energy readings are strange, Doctor. Very unstable. Whatever is down there, it is not like us." Dr. Teo nodded slowly. She had studied the patterns of thousands of intelligent species across the galaxy. Some were peaceful like the Kethrins, living in harmony with nature. Others were aggressive, building weapons and waging wars. But she had never seen patterns like these. The creatures below had brains that lit up with activity and emotion. They were organized in groups, living in what looked like organized structures. They were doing something that the Kethrins had only read about in ancient history. They were hunting other creatures for food. "We need samples," Dr. Teo said quietly. "Living samples. We need to understand what we are dealing with." Within hours, the Kethrin capture team descended to the surface of the blue planet, which humans called Earth. They moved like ghosts through the night, their technology advanced enough to remain invisible to the primitive sensors below. In a small town near the ocean, they found what they were looking for: 3 humans, separated from their groups, unaware of the danger coming for them. The first human was named Hae-Il. He was a man with dark hair and a body built for strength. He had been a soldier before leaving the military, and his muscles still held the memory of discipline and violence. He was sitting alone by a street when the Kethrin beam caught him. The world went white, and then he woke up in a strange white room with no windows and no doors that he could see. The second human was Min-Su. He was a marine biologist who studied the creatures in the ocean, and he had more knowledge about Earth's food chains and predatory systems than almost any human alive. He was taken while walking home from his laboratory, his arms full of research papers about shark behavior and hunting patterns. When he woke up in the White Room, he understood immediately that he had been captured by something not human. The third was Ji-Won, a paramedic who spent her days saving lives, helping people who were injured or sick. She had spent her entire career trying to keep humans alive, trying to prevent death. She was taken from her apartment, and when she woke up in the White Room, she began to cry, thinking of all the people she might never help again. The 3 humans were placed in a comfortable chamber that was also a prison. They could move around. There was food and water. There were things to do. But there was no way out. The walls were solid and unbreakable. The air was clean and cool, but it was still a cage. In the laboratory above the chamber, Dr. Teo began her work. She took samples from each human: hair, skin, blood, and other things that the humans did not want to give her but could not refuse. She placed the samples in machines that could read the secrets hidden in the molecules called DNA, the same molecules that held the instructions for building living bodies. The results came back slowly, one by one, piece by piece. Dr. Teo compared the human DNA with Kethrin DNA. She compared it with the DNA of other species the Kethrans had studied. She looked at the structure of human teeth, the placement of human eyes, the organization of the human digestive system. Everything she found made her eyes grow wider and wider. "This cannot be correct," she whispered to herself, looking at the data again and again. "Run the analysis again. Check it 3 times. Check it 10 times. Kerr ran the analysis many times. The answer was always the same. Humans were not simply predators. The data showed that humans were something much more dangerous, much more efficient, much more terrifying. The combination of human intelligence, human physical ability, human social cooperation, and human predatory instinct created something that the Kethran classification system had never encountered before. The computers automatically created a new category, a new classification. The file that appeared on the screen read, "Super Predator Variant, Warning, Extreme Threat Level." Dr. Teo stared at the words for a long time. In the chamber below, Hai-Il, Min-Su, and Ji-Wan had no idea that their very existence had just been declared a threat to the galaxy. They had no idea that machines were reading their genetics like a book, learning every secret about their species. They had no idea that in conference rooms, somewhere above them, other Kethrans were already talking about what should be done with them. The peaceful Kethrans, who had never killed in anger, who had never waged war, who had built their entire civilization on the principles of harmony and understanding, were now looking at 3 humans and seeing predators. Not like lions or sharks or other carnivorous animals on Earth. These were worse. These were predators with intelligence that matched the Kethrans' own. These were predators who could plan, could think, could create strategies that would make them unstoppable. And in that moment, Dr. Teo understood that the fate of an entire species depended on decisions that would be made in the next few hours. The Kethran Council was already meeting. The military advisors were already talking about protective measures. The scientists were already discussing what should be done with creatures that the computers said were too dangerous to allow to continue existing. Dr. Teo looked down at the images of the 3 humans in the chamber below. They were sitting quietly, uncertain, and afraid. Hai-Il was looking strong, but confused. Min-Su was examining the walls like a scientist trying to understand how they were built. Ji-Wan was simply sitting with her hands wrapped around her legs, hoping that someone would come and let her go home. Dr. Teo realized that she held their fate in her hands, and more than that, she held the fate of 7 billion other humans still living on the planet below in the dark of space. The question was not whether these 3 humans were dangerous. The question was whether Dr. Teo had the courage to tell the truth about what she was learning, and whether that truth could possibly save them. Hai-Il stood at the edge of the white chamber and watched the creatures move around outside the transparent wall. They were tall and strange, with bodies that seemed to be made of glass or crystal. Their limbs were thin and delicate, and they moved with careful, precise movements. He had been a soldier for 10 years before he left the military, and his training told him that these beings were not built for combat. They were built for thinking and working, not for fighting. But they had captured him without any trouble, and they had brought him here to this place that looked like it was made of white nothing. He did not know what they wanted. He did not know if they would kill him. All he knew was that he needed to stay alive, and he needed to find a way to escape. These were the things that soldiers learned. Survive first, plan second, act third. Min-Su sat in the corner of the chamber with his eyes closed, but he was not sleeping. He was thinking. His mind was working through everything he knew about the beings that had captured them. He was a marine biologist, and he had spent his life studying predators and prey, hunters and the hunted. He knew about the food chain and how nature worked. Every creature had a role. Every creature was designed by millions of years of evolution to fill a space in the world. These creatures were clearly intelligent. They had technology that was far beyond anything humans had created. They had ships that could cross the stars. They had weapons that could capture people without harming them. They had laboratories with machines that humans did not have names for yet. But what were they designed for? What was their role in the universe? Minsu began to think about their own biology. They moved carefully. They did not seem aggressive. Their eyes were large and forward-facing like human eyes, but there was something different about them. They seemed peaceful. They seemed like creatures that had never hunted. They seemed like creatures that had never needed to hunt. This gave Min-Su an idea. Jiwon spent most of her time sitting and thinking about the people she had left behind. She thought about her family and her friends. She thought about the patients she had helped in the emergency room. She thought about the old man she had helped just before she was taken. The one whose heart had stopped, but she had brought back to life through CPR. She wondered if he was still alive. She wondered if anyone was looking for her. She wondered if anyone even knew what had happened to her. She was also thinking about survival. As a paramedic, she had learned about human biology. She knew what the human body needed to survive. She knew that her captors had given them food and water. The food was strange, but edible. The water was clean. They were not trying to starve them. This meant something. This meant that they wanted to keep the humans alive. But why? Above the chamber, in the laboratory, Dr. Teo was working on the most important research of her life. The data from the human DNA was extraordinary. Every time she looked at it, she found something new, something shocking. The human predatory system was not primitive. It was advanced. In fact, it was more advanced than the Kethran understanding of predatory systems. Humans had eyes that pointed forward, which gave them the ability to see in 3 dimensions and track moving targets. This was perfect for hunting. Humans had teeth with special sharp points called canines, which were designed for tearing meat. Humans had a digestive system that could break down protein and fat from meat more efficiently than plant material. But more than the physical abilities, there was the psychology. Dr. Teo studied human brain patterns. She looked at how human brains worked. And what she found was that humans had something called theory of mind. This meant that humans could think about what other creatures were thinking. They could predict the actions of other beings. They could plan and organize. They could work together in groups to hunt prey that was much larger and more powerful than they were individually. This was the most dangerous thing of all. It was not just that humans were predators. It was that humans were intelligent predators. They could use tools. They could create weapons. They could work together and plan complex hunts. They could communicate their ideas to other humans. They could pass knowledge from one generation to the next. Dr. Teo called in her team and showed them the data. Every scientist in the room understood what they were looking at. Humans were apex predators on their planet. They were at the very top of the food chain. They hunted for food. They competed with each other. They had built weapons that could kill from great distances. They had organized warfare. They had created strategies for victory. We need to understand their capacity for violence, Dr. Teo said to her team. Not just their physical ability to harm others, but their psychological capacity. How do they think about killing? What stops them from killing each other? Keir was working on behavioral analysis. He was studying images and data about human civilization. And what he was finding was strange. Humans did kill each other. Throughout their history, humans had engaged in wars and violence. But they had also created things like laws and religions and philosophies that told them not to kill. They had built systems to punish those who killed wrongly. They had created art and music and literature about love and peace. It is like they are fighting against themselves, Keir said to Dr. Teo. They are predators who are trying not to be predators. They create rules to control their own nature. This fascinated Dr. Teo. She decided that she needed to communicate with the humans. She needed to understand them better. So she went down to the chamber and stood outside the transparent wall where the humans could see her. Min-Su immediately noticed her. He stood up and walked to the wall. He looked at the tall creature in front of him. She was clearly the one in charge. She was the one who had captured them. Dr. Teo held up her delicate hands to show that she had no weapons. Then she made a gesture of communication. She wanted to talk. Min-Su understood. He began to draw pictures on the wall using a material that the Kethrans had provided. He drew a picture of Earth. He drew a picture of humans hunting. He drew pictures of the food chain, showing how smaller animals were eaten by larger animals and how humans stood at the top. Dr. Teo watched with great interest. She understood the drawings. She understood that Min-Su was trying to explain human evolution and human nature. Over the next hours, Min-Su drew more and more pictures. He drew pictures of human wars. He drew pictures of human cities and human technology. He drew pictures of human families and human love. And then he drew something that made Dr. Teo understand everything. He drew a picture of humans fighting against each other, with weapons and blood. But below that picture, he drew a picture of the same humans helping each other, healing each other, saving each other from death. The message was clear. Humans were dangerous, but humans were also capable of choosing not to be dangerous. Humans had conquered their world. They had killed most of the other large animals. They had become the most powerful species on their planet. And yet they had also created laws and rules to stop themselves from using that power against each other. Dr. Teo stood very still for a long time. She was beginning to understand that humans were not simply monsters or threats. They were something much more complex. They were predators who understood that they were predators and who were trying to do something about it. This was information that the Kethran Council needed to hear. But Dr. Teo was not sure they would want to hear it. The Council would look at the data about human predatory nature and see only danger. They would see a threat that needed to be eliminated. They would not see what Dr. Teo was beginning to see, that humans might be the most interesting species in the entire galaxy. The Kethran High Council chamber was a room of pure white, with walls that seemed to glow from within. The council members sat in a circle, their tall bodies arranged in positions that showed both power and peace. There were 7 of them, each with thousands of years of experience in leading the Kethran race. They had guided their species through the stars for 300 years. They had made decisions that affected billions of lives. They had seen other species rise and fall. But they had never faced a situation like this. Dr. Teo stood in the center of the chamber and displayed her findings on screens that floated in the air around her. She showed the genetic data. She showed the behavioral patterns. She showed the historical records of human violence and human warfare. And she showed the council something else, the evidence of human compassion, human love, and human moral growth. What we are seeing, Dr. Teo began, her voice steady and clear, is a species that has not yet reached its full potential. Humans are predators, yes, but they are conscious predators. They understand what they are, and they are actively working to become something better. Council member Ryu stood up. He was the oldest of the council members, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. His crystalline body seemed to shine brighter when he was angry, and he was very angry. Dr. Teo, you are asking us to allow a species of apex predators to continue existing. You are asking us to accept the presence of creatures who have evolved specifically to hunt, to kill, to destroy. Your own data shows that humans have committed genocide against their own kind. They wage wars. They create weapons designed only to maximize death. And you want us to believe that they should be allowed to advance further in this galaxy? Other council members nodded in agreement. The danger seemed obvious to them. Humans were predators. Predators were dangerous. The solution was simple: remove the threat. But Dr. Teo was not finished. She activated a new set of images. These showed human history, but told differently. They showed how humans had created laws against killing. They showed how human philosophers had written about peace and morality. They showed how humans had abolished slavery, a practice that their own ancestors had practiced for thousands of years. They showed human doctors and nurses who dedicated their lives to saving people. They showed human artists and musicians who created beauty instead of weapons. Yes, Dr. Teo said, humans are predators. But the most important thing is not what they are biologically. The most important thing is what they choose to become. Humans have developed moral consciousness. They have created systems of ethics. They have built civilizations where violence is punished and compassion is rewarded. This is the opposite of what we would expect from a pure predator. Council member Naya spoke next. She was younger than Ryu, but still carried great authority. Dr. Teo, I understand your point. But how can we trust them? How can we allow predators with the intelligence of the Kethrans to exist in our galaxy? Eventually, they will want to expand beyond their planet. Eventually, they will encounter other species. And when they do, their predatory nature will emerge. They will hunt us like we hunt nothing. They will destroy everything we have built. With respect, Council member, Dr. Teo replied, I must point out something that the data clearly shows. We, the Kethrans, are not as peaceful as we believe ourselves to be. We have conquered other worlds. We have subjugated lesser species. We have built weapons of terrible destruction. The only difference between us and humans is that we deny our capacity for violence while humans acknowledge theirs. This statement caused immediate reaction in the chamber. Council members stood up and began to speak at the same time. Some agreed with Dr. Teo, others disagreed loudly. The chamber became a place of noise and emotion, which was very unusual for the peaceful Kethrans. Ryu raised his hand for silence. His authority was such that all the other council members immediately stopped talking and sat down. What you are suggesting, Dr. Teo, is that humans are not more dangerous than us. You are suggesting that they are simply more honest about their nature. Is that correct? Yes, Dr. Teo said. That is exactly what I am suggesting. Humans are predators who know they are predators. This knowledge makes them more cautious, not less. A predator who understands the moral weight of taking a life is far less likely to kill than a being who believes they are peaceful and therefore can do whatever they want without guilt. In the chamber where the three humans were held, Hyil had been listening to everything. The Kethrans had not realized that human ears could hear frequencies that they were using for their private communications. Hyil had figured this out within the first hours of his captivity. He had been a soldier, and soldiers learned to observe everything. He told Jiwan and Min Su what he had heard. They are debating whether to kill us. They are debating whether to kill all of us, all of humanity. Jiwan began to cry. The weight of this knowledge was too much to bear. Not just her life was in danger. The lives of everyone she had ever loved, everyone she had ever helped, everyone on the entire planet, they were all in danger because of some decision being made in a room above them. Min Su, however, was thinking. He was analyzing the situation like a scientist. If they were going to kill us immediately, they would have done it already. We have been here for days. They have taken samples and studied us. They want information. They want to understand us. Why does that matter? Jiwan asked through her tears. Because, Min Su said, if we can give them information they want, we might be able to negotiate. We might be able to convince them that we are worth keeping alive. And the best way to do that is to show them our humanity, to show them that we are more than just predators, that we are conscious beings capable of choice and morality. Hyil understood immediately. You want to use their own standards against them. Show them that we are not pure predators. Exactly, Min-Su said. They are afraid of us. That means they respect our power. But if we can show them our wisdom, our compassion, our capacity for peace, then maybe they will see us not as threats, but as equals. Meanwhile, in the council chamber, the debate was still happening. More and more council members were beginning to doubt Ryu's position. The evidence that Dr. Teo presented was compelling. Humans were dangerous, yes, but so was every intelligent species. The question was not whether humans were predators, but whether they could be trusted to manage that predatory nature. Ryu, however, was not giving up. He stood before the council one more time. Even if what Dr. Teo says is true, we cannot take the risk. The humans must be eliminated. It is the only way to ensure the safety of all peaceful species in this galaxy. Dr. Teo stood as well, and then she said something that shocked everyone in the chamber. If you vote to eliminate humanity, then you should know that I have taken measures to ensure that the humans will learn about you. I have given Min-Su information about Kethran technology and location. If you destroy his species, then you are simply creating exactly what you fear, predators with knowledge of your weaknesses, with every reason to hunt you across the stars. You will not create peace. You will create a war that humanity will never forgive you for. The chamber went silent. Dr. Teo had just made a threat to the council itself. She had revealed her willingness to betray her own people to save another species. She had forced the council to understand that the threat of humans was not theoretical, it was real. And it existed because the council's actions might create it. Ryu looked at Dr. Teo with an expression of both anger and respect. The council members looked at each other. For the first time, they understood that this situation was more complex than they had thought. The vote would be postponed. The debate would continue. And the fate of humanity would hang in balance for at least one more day. The alarm system of the Kethran vessel began to sound. It was a soft sound, not like human alarms, but it was a sound that meant something was wrong. Throughout the ship, Kethran workers and scientists stopped what they were doing and looked around in confusion. Nothing had happened. There was no damage report. The ship's systems were all functioning normally, yet the alarm continued to sound. What the Kethrans did not know was that Dr. Teo had deliberately triggered a false alert in the containment wing. She had disabled the locks that held the three humans in their chamber, and then she had started the alarm to create confusion and distraction. In the 30 seconds before the Kethran security would begin to investigate, the three humans would have their only chance to escape. Hai-Il moved first. He had been waiting for this opportunity, preparing his mind for action. He did not know what Dr. Teo's reasons were, but he understood what was happening. The transparent wall of the chamber had become transparent no more. It was sliding upward, creating an opening. The door that had been sealed was now open. "Go," Hai-Il said to Min-Su and Ji-Won. "Now, move quickly and quietly." Hai-Il led them through the corridors of the ship. His soldier's instincts took over. He moved with precision and purpose, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the main pathways. He was looking for the ship's control center. If they could get there, they could access the ship's systems and possibly escape. Min-Su was moving more slowly, his scientific mind trying to understand the layout of the vessel. He was looking at the walls and the ceilings, trying to understand how the Kethran technology worked. The ship was beautiful in its design, all flowing lines and soft curves. But Min-Su could see that it was not designed for defense. The Kethrans were not a warlike people. Ji-Won was trying to control her breathing and her fear. As a paramedic, she had learned to stay calm in crisis situations. But this was not a normal crisis. This was escape from an alien ship with technology she did not understand. Still, she followed Hai-Il and Min-Su, trusting that they knew what they were doing. Ahead of them, the corridor branched into two directions. Hai-Il stopped and listened. He could hear the sound of Catherine footsteps coming from the left corridor. From the right corridor, there was silence. He pointed right, and the three humans moved quickly in that direction. They passed through several chambers, each one filled with strange equipment and strange lights. In one chamber, they found a supply room with materials that Ji-won recognized. She quickly gathered several items and placed them in a container that she could carry. She did not know exactly what she would need, but she was thinking like a paramedic, gathering supplies for emergency situations. They came to a chamber that was larger than the others. Inside, there were several Catherines working at stations that controlled information and systems. For a moment, nothing happened. The Catherines looked up and saw three strange creatures, bipedal, warm-blooded, dangerous, standing in their chamber. "Step away from the controls," Hai-Il said in a voice of absolute authority. The tone was the voice of a soldier giving orders to his troops, but applied to beings he did not understand, and who did not understand him. The Catherines did not move. They seemed confused by this command given in human language that they could not understand. But their confusion did not last long. They began to move away from the controls, slowly and carefully. They were not afraid. Exactly. Catherines did not experience fear in the way that humans did, but they understood danger, and they could see that these humans were dangerous. Min-Soo immediately moved to the control console. He began to study the Catherine interface. It was nothing like any human technology, but the principles were similar. Information flowed from sensors to processors to displays. Systems could be controlled through input devices. Within minutes, Min-Soo had figured out enough of the Catherine system to understand the layout of the ship. "There is a docking bay," Min-Soo said to Hai-Il. "About 200 meters to the southeast. There are small vessels there." Ji-won was handling the Catherine workers with the gentle but firm approach that she used with patients in the emergency room. "We do not want to hurt you," she said to them, even though they could not understand her words. "We just want to leave. We want to go home." Something in her voice or her expression communicated the meaning, because the Catherines did not try to sound an alarm or call for help. They simply stood there, watching as the three humans took control of their chamber. The journey to the docking bay was faster than expected. Hai-Il was learning the layout of the ship quickly, and he was able to lead them through routes that avoided the main areas where Catherines were working. When they finally reached the docking bay, they found exactly what Min-Soo had promised: small ships designed for travel to and from planetary surfaces. But as they approached the ships, a group of Catherine security personnel appeared, blocking the way. These Catherines were taller and more muscular than the others, though still small compared to Hai-Il. They wore uniforms that identified them as security, and they were holding devices that looked like weapons. For a moment, it seemed like violence would be unavoidable. Hai-Il prepared himself to fight. He calculated the distance, the number of opponents, the chances of success. It would be difficult, but it was possible that he could disable these Catherines without killing them. But before he could move, Min-Soo stepped forward and raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "Wait," he said. "We do not want to fight. We want to talk." The Catherine security personnel seemed surprised by this. They lowered their weapons slightly. "My name is Min-Soo," he said, speaking slowly and carefully. "I am a scientist like many of you, I think. We have been captured and studied, yes, but we mean you no harm. We simply want to return to our world. We want to go home to our families. Is that wrong?" The Catherine, who seemed to be in command, lowered his weapon further. Perhaps he was moved by Min-Soo's words. Perhaps he understood that these beings were not the monsters that the Council feared. Or perhaps he simply understood that these humans would choose peace if they could. "You will not harm us?" the Catherine asked in a language that somehow Min-Soo could almost understand. "No," Min-Soo said. "We will not. We will simply leave peacefully." The Catherine considered this for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and pointed to one of the small ships. "Go," he said, "before the council decides what to do with you. Go quickly, or you will not get another chance." Hae-il, Min-soo, and Ji-won did not waste time asking questions. They moved quickly toward the ship. As they entered the small vessel, they could see the Kethran security personnel standing silently, watching them depart. None of them tried to stop them. None of them sounded an alarm. The ship began to move. It separated from the Kethran vessel and moved toward the planet below, toward Earth, toward home. As they descended through the atmosphere, the three humans looked at each other with expressions of relief and shock. They had escaped. They were alive, and they were going home. But they carried with them the knowledge that Dr. Teo had shared. They knew about the Kethrans now. They knew about the debate. They knew that humanity's future hung in balance, dependent on decisions being made on a distant starship. And they knew that they had information that could change everything. The Galactic Council Chamber was a place unlike anything that humans had ever imagined. It was not a room on a planet. It was a vast station that floated in space, a place where representatives from 100 different species came to discuss the future of the galaxy. The chamber itself was a hemisphere of crystalline material that allowed visitors to see the stars on all sides. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Hae-il, Min-soo, and Ji-won stood in the center of this chamber, and they felt very small. Around them, in seats that rose in circles upward, sat representatives from many different alien species. There were beings made of crystal, like the Kethrans. There were beings of pure energy. There were beings with multiple limbs and multiple heads. There were beings so strange that the human mind could barely process their appearance. But despite all this diversity, the chamber had fallen into complete silence when Hae-il, Min-soo, and Ji-won entered. The entire Galactic Council was watching them, studying them, waiting to hear what these dangerous creatures called humans had to say. Dr. Teo stood beside them. She had argued before the council to allow the three humans to speak. She had argued that it was only fair for a species to defend itself before judgment was made. The council had agreed, but with reluctance. Council member Ryu was particularly unhappy with the decision, but he had accepted it because it was the will of the majority. Min-soo was chosen to speak first. He stepped forward to the center of the chamber and began to talk. His voice was clear and strong, and translation devices conveyed his words to every being in the chamber. "I am Min-soo," he began. "I am a scientist. I study the biology and behavior of the creatures on my world. I have spent my life trying to understand the food chains and ecosystems of Earth. So I understand why you see us as dangerous. I understand why the data about humans worried you." Min-soo showed charts and images of human evolution. He showed how humans had hunted large animals to extinction. He showed how humans had waged wars against each other. He showed how human weapons had become more and more powerful over time. He presented all the evidence that would make any species fear humanity. "But," Min-soo continued, "I ask you to look at one other thing. Look at what humans have chosen to do with that power. We could have continued to hunt animals until all of them were gone. Instead, we created laws to protect endangered species. We could have continued to wage wars until we destroyed ourselves. Instead, we created organizations to prevent war and promote peace. We could have used our intelligence only to create weapons. Instead, we used it to create medicine and art and literature and music." Min-soo showed more images. Images of hospitals where human doctors saved lives. Images of art galleries where humans displayed beautiful creations. Images of families gathered together showing love and compassion. Images of humans helping other humans, caring for those who were sick or injured or in need. "The question," Min-soo said, "is not whether humans are predators. The answer is yes, we are. We are predators who evolved on a world where predation was necessary for survival, But the real question is whether we are predators who can be trusted. And the answer to that is also yes, because we have proven over and over that we choose peace when peace is possible. We choose compassion when compassion is possible. We choose life over death whenever we can. When Minsu finished speaking, there was silence in the chamber. Then, slowly, some of the alien representatives began to move their limbs or make sounds that seemed to indicate agreement. Not all of them, but some. Next, Ji-won stepped forward. She was smaller than Hae-il and Min-soo, and she looked fragile compared to the other beings in the chamber, but her voice was steady and strong. "My name is Ji-won," she began. "I am a paramedic. This means I am someone who saves lives. Every day, I go to work knowing that I might need to help someone who is dying. I might need to help someone who is suffering. And I do this for no reason other than that it is right to help others." Ji-won described her work in detail. She talked about holding the hands of dying patients. She talked about comforting grieving families. She talked about the feeling of bringing someone back from the edge of death. She talked about the joy of knowing that someone would live because of her actions. "You see humans as predators," Ji-won said, her voice becoming emotional. "But you should understand that humans are also healers. We are also capable of incredible compassion. Some of my best moments in life have been when I have saved someone's life. Some of my best moments have been when I have comforted someone who was suffering. If that is not the opposite of predatory nature, then I do not know what is." Ji-won then spoke about human culture. She described music and art. She described literature and philosophy. She described how humans created beauty and meaning in their lives, even though they lived difficult and often short lives. She described how humans could love each other with a passion that transcended mere survival. "You fear us because we are strong," Ji-won said. "But strength without compassion is nothing. We humans have learned, over millions of years, that true strength comes from the ability to be gentle when gentleness is needed, and strong when strength is needed. We are strong, yes, but we are also loving. And that love is what defines us more than our strength ever could." When Ji-won finished, there were several alien beings who seemed to be crying or showing other signs of emotional response. Even the most alien among them seemed moved by her words. Finally, Hae-il stepped forward. As a soldier, he was the one most clearly identified with human violence and human predatory nature. The chamber seemed to tense as he approached. "I am Hae-il," he said. "I was a soldier. I was trained to kill. I was trained to fight. I was trained to see other beings as either allies or threats. This is what humans do when they prepare for war. But I tell you now that being a soldier is one of the hardest things a human can do, precisely because it requires us to do something that goes against our nature." Hae-il spoke about the weight of violence. He spoke about the psychological cost of killing, even in defense of others. He spoke about the guilt and the nightmares and the moral struggles that soldiers faced. He spoke about how many human soldiers suffered from depression and trauma because of the violence they had witnessed or committed. "The fact that we suffer when we commit violence shows that violence is not our natural state," Hae-il said. "We are not like some creatures that kill without remorse. When a human kills, it damages us. It changes us. It makes us less than we were before. This is proof that we are not monsters. This is proof that we have moral consciousness." Hae-il then showed the chamber images of human military history, but from a different perspective. He showed how human soldiers had often chosen not to attack civilians, even when they could have. He showed how human soldiers had protected others at risk to themselves. He showed how human soldiers had been punished for committing atrocities, showing that humans had systems to prevent and punish unjust violence. "Yes," Hae-il concluded, "humans have committed terrible violence, but we have also built systems to prevent that violence and to punish those who commit it unjustly. We have created laws of war. We have created organizations dedicated to preventing war. We have learned through bitter experience that violence is the last resort, not the first choice. When He-Il finished speaking, the chamber was absolutely silent. No one moved. No one made a sound. The three humans had presented their case, and now the council would have to decide. Dr. Teo stood and addressed the council one more time. You have heard from three humans. You have seen the evidence of what they are. They are predators, yes, but they are conscious predators. They are predators who have chosen to develop ethics and morality. They are predators who struggle against their own nature to be better. In all my studies of the species of this galaxy, I have never seen a species more capable of moral growth and development. Humanity is not a threat. Humanity is a hope. Council member Ryu stood as well. His voice was calm and measured, but there was something in his tone that suggested he was beginning to doubt his earlier position. The evidence presented today has complicated our understanding of this species. The humans are dangerous, yes, but they have presented a compelling argument that they are also capable of wisdom and compassion. I propose that we vote to grant humans the status of disciplined predator species, a classification that recognizes their power but also their capacity for restraint and moral judgment. The vote was taken. The result was overwhelming. Humanity would be accepted into the galactic community.